I'm off to have a look at a bike that I'm sure pretty much all of us would like to own. It's for sale locally, so time well spent going to have a look at it. It's a Brough Superior SS100 replica project race bike, I think would be a fair description of it. And if you watch this video to the end, and it's only going to be a few minutes long, I will tell you what I think about the bike. I'll also give you my view on the prices if you wanted to build a bike like it from scratch, including frames, engines, forks and all that you'd need to do it. If you like this kind of stuff, then subscribe, and I'll take that as a hint to make more like this. Thank you. So, what did I think of that Jap engined Brough Superior replica? Well, first of all, when you're buying something from somebody, do they seem like a nice, honest bloke? And indeed he does. He's a very straightforward chap. His family and his father have been into old bikes for decades, so I think that's a very good sign. He didn't build the bike himself, he's taken it in as part of a deal, so understandably he wasn't able to answer all the questions about how it got built, etc., but that's fair. I guess he can probably find out more with a bit more asking. Apologise for the filming of it, because it was kind of jammed in. I couldn't get a better angle, and the reason why there's yellow things here is this is a Buell, and it's 1000cc, it's 80 horsepower, so that's something to have a look at while I'm talking. I might even do a video on it if people are interested. I think the vendor's description is fair. It's a replica project bike. It's not a genuine Brough. It's a project, and what you get is what you see. I think if you were thinking to make a sprint bike rather than a road bike, it would be something to look at. The engine's an 880, and what that means is the 8 refers to the old way of categorising engine power, 8, and the 80 is the actual horsepower it probably would have made in period, or maybe now with a bit of tweaking. It has got £8,000 worth of receipts for work done on the engine by Ewan Cameron, and Ewan is absolutely the man for this kind of stuff. There's pretty much nobody better for that. There's no known history on the engine, but many were used in small racing cars and short circuit and grass track racing and stuff like that, sidecar outfits, so maybe that's where it's come from. The engine has been set up by Ewan and test run which is a big plus point. Ewan's absolutely the man, as I said. It's been set up to run on alcohol, so if you wanted to put it on petrol, it'd have to be rejetted and set differently. One thing to point out, as far as I can see, it's got speedway heads on, because both exhaust ports are facing forward, and they tend to be quite thinly finned. So if you were using it on the road a lot and going for long runs, I think you'd probably get hot. Again, that's something to talk to the vendor about and see what he thinks. But an 880 engine, which is quite rare, and especially one run by Ewan, is a big plus for it. So it's registered as a 1927 bike, but in 1927 they wouldn't have used an 880 engine. They would have been using J-Tour, K-Tour, more traditional looking Jap engines. But if you're building a race bike or something to sprint, then an 880 would be the thing to have. If you wanted to build your own engine, and you can build them from scratch, there's various firms that produce all the castings, crankcases, barrels, heads, etc. And then if you're a very skilled engineer, you could turn all of that into an engine. But Ewan Cameron also makes brand new engines entirely from new stuff from scratch, and they're about £20,000 plus tax, which sounds like a lot, but consider the amount of work involved, and I think that's pretty much a bargain. So moving on to the frame. So the seller, he didn't know who made the frame. It's fair enough, he didn't make it. It looks to me like it was being made for a smaller Jap engine, because you can see where there are scallops cut into the tubing to fit the 880 in. But that's what you're getting if that's the bike you're looking for. But I guess it started off maybe thinking it was going to have a different engine in it. Pendines were Brough Superior's like racing model, and in period most of the racing was pretty much straight line stuff, so sprinting, beaches, Brooklands, etc. So the engines sit a bit lower to the ground, which means, as you can see, the cornering on the right side is a bit challenging. So you could move the exhausts to get a bit more cornering clearance, but you've got the magnetos there, so again it kind of points to it being good for a sprint bike rather than a road bike. I couldn't get a clear side-on look to look at the geometry to see whether it's maybe a Pendine, but it does look quite low. So then the forks. So the forks are said to be Jake Robbins forks, and Jake is top man for making forks. So the original forks on Broughs were copies of Harley JD forks, and Brough copied them and called them Castles. So again, Jake is the man for making forks, and sort of £6,000 to £8,000 he could make you a replica set of forks. And this bike is said to have forks by Jake, so another big tick in the box. So the gearbox, so the original bikes in 27 would have had about 40-45 horsepower, and they needed like a heavy duty Sturmey Archer gearbox to take the load. I can't tell whether this bike that's for sale has got a heavy duty box on it, but when you consider the engine's maybe making 80 horsepower, it would need to be quite a substantial gearbox to take the load, otherwise it will just kind of blow it to pieces. So that's something to explore further with the vendor, if that's of interest, if you are going to sprint it rather than just perhaps look at it. So later Jap Pad specials, and indeed later Broughs SS100s used the Norton Doll's Head gearbox, which is much more robust, and they're fairly plentiful and available. You can buy used ones on eBay for about £500, and then you might spend a couple of £100 if you're doing it yourself, kind of bringing it up to perfection. So that's a lot cheaper than a heavy duty Sturmey box, which if you could find one is going to be a few £1,000s just on its own. I've got a separate video about the Doll's Head gearbox if that's of interest. So the engines and frame numbers on the bike are not like official Brough ones. The Brough Club's got very extensive archives, and this isn't a genuine Brough, and the guy selling it's very honest about that, says it's a replica, which is good. And just to comment, the Brough Club knows the engines and frame numbers of all the rear Broughs, the real Broughs. So if you're a nefarious character, don't bother trying to fake one. They know, you get caught out. So in summary about this bike, the chap selling it seems very honest and straightforward. He's describing it fairly for what it is. It's more of a kind of a sprint bike replica project than a road going real Brough, if you like. And finally, a few thoughts if you wanted to make your own replica Brough from scratch. So Ewan Cameron, and I'll put the details below for contact details. So a kind of a mid-20s Jap engine, Ewan will make you one from absolute scratch, all new stuff, perfection essentially, for £20,000 plus tax. Jake Robbins will make you a set of proper Castle forks for sort of £6,000–7,000 depending on the specification, and then you obviously end up with the frame. So you can buy various lugs from various sources to make a frame, and if I just wiggle things around, I'll show you one. So this, if my camera will focus, is a lug that came from the Brough Club. You can imagine it sitting, if I can get this in the right place, kind of sitting at the back like that, holding the wheel in like that, and a pair of these from the Brough Club in the right materials I think were about £100. But then you've got to obviously get all the tubing and all the other lugs, and you need to be a pretty skilled machinist, engineer to put all that together. But if you didn't have all those skills, you didn't want to go down that route, then a replica frame properly made is going to cost you at least £10,000. So, but if you're making a bike that might be worth 100 at the end of it, then it's probably relatively cheap. So gearboxes, I said, so a doll's head gearbox, £500 second hand, maybe £1,000 all in, but if it's in perfect condition you get someone to build it. Petrol tank, they're quite involving to make a really nice kind of Brough style petrol tank. They're probably at least £1,000 now, maybe a fair bit more than that depending who you get to make it. And then all the other bits and bobs, wheels and brakes and 501 bits that make up a bike. If you weren't making it absolute catalogue perfect, then you could buy various bits from Auto Jumbles, but there's a lot of bits to find. So that probably concludes matters. So probably in summary, if you're looking to build a kind of a replica sprint bike or race bike, then I'd suggest you come and have a look at this. But hopefully I've given you enough of a steer. If you wanted to make one yourself from scratch, what the kind of costs are, and I'll kind of summarise it in the comment section. A couple of other things before you disappear off. I'm building my own overhead valve Jap engine 1930s bike. It's going to be 1200cc and quite a high engine spec, and the reason is my grandfather and father built a Jap engine special in 1933. My grandfather had a motorcycle shop way back then, and they were building what they hoped to be was the fastest bike in the county of Sussex. They called it the Knucker, which is an ancient Sussex dragon, and also the sound it made. And if anyone is interested, I could make a film about that. So, but the only way I know if you're interested in any of my ramblings, and you can tell I'm pretty amateurish this, so please give me any constructive criticism you'd like, is to for you to tell me. So if you like this sort of stuff, click like, that helps me, so I kind of know you like this. And subscribe, and that's another clue to me, otherwise I've got no idea whether you like this and want more or not. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and if you subscribe and like, I'll make some more. Thank you.